Anthony Mangnall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for calling me on such an important debate. And can I start by thanking the Secretary of State and the Minister for the time that they have given myself and members of the International Parliamentary Alliance on China and others in discussing the contents of this bill and what it does. And as I understand it, and I hope I get this explanation right, the bill that the government has put forward gives the power to screen and call in acquisitions of assets deemed to pose a threat to national security, and that those assets might include land, physical and intellectual property. And as a result, that the Secretary of State will be given retrospective powers to consider investments made over the past 5 years. And I welcome, actually, the opportunity to have cross-party consensus. It seems to me, as a new intake Member of Parliament, these are one of those rare moments where there is consensus in this House to produce a truly remarkable piece of legislation. And I hope that the government will listen to the comments carefully that have been made already. I welcome the sentiments of this bill, and I hope that in passing into law, this will be the first step in attempting to match Australia's Foreign Investment Reform Bill and America's Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernisation Act of 2018. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, and there is a very sizable but, we have, as other members have made clear, a long way to go before this legislation reflects the comprehensive laws that are in place by many of our Five Eyes nation colleagues. The UK seeks to be a competitive, free and fair economy. And I believe that that is sacrosanct, and that we must do everything we can to ensure that businesses and people around the world look at our country as an attractive destination for investment. A stable democracy, highly skilled workforce, league table topping universities, the rule of law and world-class industries such as photonics, fintech, all make the UK an attractive place to invest that benefits investors and British citizens alike. Our laws are balanced as a result, encouraging foreign investment and adhering to the UK laws and national interests. And that balance has become all the more challenging with the rapid technological change, internationalist agendas, and our own failure, if I may say, to hold a strategic dependency review. In short, the threats to our national security are numerous. They are real and they are present, and they come in a multitude of forms. Madam Deputy Speaker, the narrow scope of this bill limits its impact, and it fails to address the threats that the UK is actually currently facing. And it holds the potential to see us become complicit with businesses and organisations that violate human rights. Now, the national security, which the Minister mentioned during his opening, the Secretary of State mentioned during his opening statement, remains ill-defined and to the detriment of the objectives of this bill. Added to which, under the screening mechanism outlined in this bill, there are a number of sectors that are not addressed. Education, for example, a core part of the UK's economy and an attraction to thousands of foreign students across the globe, but also institutions that undertake research development programmes in a myriad of different areas, including defence, development and foreign affairs. A recent study has found that 10 UK university laboratories are now dependent on significant investment from Chinese defence firms. Yet our universities have not been specified in the scope of the government's consultation on sectors to mandatory notification. How can this not be considered as a national security risk? The pharmaceutical sector, as already mentioned by so many across this House, a global success story, with many companies basing their operations here in the UK. But there is nothing in this bill that would have stopped or reviewed the Chinese takeover of Bioproducts Laboratory. At a time when we face greater and graver challenges around the health of mankind, the government needs to rethink what is needed to be included in the scope of their consultation. I have, Madam Deputy Speaker, touched on two sectors and said nothing about the UK's nuclear sector or our water industry. Both need to be given the cover to protect our national security. Our core infrastructure that is intimately connected to our national security is routinely being placed in the hands of foreign owners and should be a cause of great concern to the whole House. It's already been mentioned by the previous speaker about the 23 out of 117 Chinese acquisitions of UK firms. If less than 20% of Chinese acquisitions are being scrutinised under this legislation, then I would argue that there is a need for a rethink over the parts of this bill and to strengthen it where able.
I
would be delighted to.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just think it would be helpful in this debate for us to decide, are we talking about foreign ownership of assets, or are we talking about Chinese ownership of assets? Because obviously there's a gradation between it, but sometimes I'm hearing some of the contributions that We just don't like foreign ownership of assets, and I'm sure that's what my honourable friend does not mean at all.
I think it's important to recognise the fact that China has got a poor track record in this case, and it has not been addressed. Of course, we are not against just foreign ownership. We want to make sure that the structure is in place to scrutinise these in the correct and orderly way that protects the opportunity that we can have in this country. I thank him for his intervention. Madam Deputy Speaker, a few months ago I broke cover early on to vote against the government over the proposals to see our 5G network built by Huawei, and I'm not living it down yet. I did so, Madam Deputy Speaker, because, as I've mentioned, our core infrastructure should never be compromised by foreign investment, and that this was a severe threat to our national security. I welcome the fact that the government has moved so significantly and plans to phase out Huawei by 2027. But I also did so because of the reports of human rights violations by Huawei. The Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead's success in passing the Modern Slavery Act is a proud moment for the UK. But it is worthless unless we use this legislation to stop dealing with companies who are reported to be using slave labour and looking to invest into the United Kingdom. Nothing in this bill shows a provision to prevent companies complicit with gross human rights violations from investing in the United Kingdom, and I feel that that is a huge oversight. It would be an injustice and morally wrong for the UK ever to look the other way as money created from slave labour to be invested in this country. We have been told that this is not the right bill. But with all due respect, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is the same excuse that is used by the whips to me on every single occasion that I have raised concern with a piece of legislation. If we are going to bring forward the correct pieces of legislation, then let us bring them forward. If not, do not be surprised if we try to put on and tack on amendments that will address the issues that so many members across this House feel so strongly about. Madam Deputy Speaker, the line between state and civil actor has been blurred. Yes, I will.
Just very briefly. Making such a brilliant speech, I don't really want to interrupt him, but I will do briefly. He's making that all these concerns can really be wrapped up in a public interest amendment so that there can be a human rights element or a public interest or a character amendment which would give ministers some leeway and some scope to wrap up all these concerns.
The honourable gentleman is absolutely correct, and I hope the Minister is listening, and we might expect such an amendment to arrive before us in due course, and that with the consent of this House we might see it implemented. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I was saying, the line between state and civil actor has been blurred. The civil-military fusion requires legislation, and this bill is in need of development to counter it. I therefore ask the Government very quickly to consider the following few proposals. Firstly, the introduction of a Committee on Foreign Investment. Our colleagues in America have introduced such a system, and I believe that this would alleviate any decisions from being made for political expediency. I believe, as the Right Honourable or the Honourable Member was saying before me, this would encourage parliamentary scrutiny, transparency, and ensure that there is an understanding of the entire system. Secondly, I'd like to suggest that they expand upon the definition of national security to include human rights. We do more often or not in this country and in this place develop policy around moral obligations. This should be one of those cases. Third, Madam Deputy Speaker, increase the scope and use this bill to address organised crime. This is something that has not been raised, and if I may, on just a small tenet, reference the ivory trade. The UK very successfully closed the domestic trade of ivory. There was a trade across the globe of domestic trade of ivory that was linked to Al-Shabaab. There is a way in which you can track organised crime down to terrorist organisations, and I feel that there is scope within this bill to do so. Fourth, Madam Deputy Speaker, a recent study found that at least 929 UK shell companies used in 89 corruption and money laundering cases accounted for £137 billion. These companies are registered through Companies House. Use this bill to be able to alleviate the burdens and ensure that there are less implications for the UK. We can, Madam Deputy Speaker, attract investment and tackle malign activities. I hope the Government will engage in the constructive manner to which they have introduced this bill, and I will be supporting them tonight, and I'm sorry for going on for so long.